a fairly young, successful Egyptian businessman who made all his money with breweries in Egypt. And he made a lot of money. And he wanted to go into racehorses. And he was in like his second year of racing. And so he gave me free reign, and he would buy like $20 million of horses a year. And so we took him from, dead start to the top, the number one stable in the United States in 2 years, with a budget much lower than the Arabs or some of the other traditional guys were spending. 20 million sounds like a lot, but they spend a lot more. And that got noticed. They said, holy shit. And then, what's his secret? And he was very smart. He was a good manager, and he had great trainers, and we couldn't have done it without him and the access to great trainers. But it was also us. They couldn't have done it without us. We were the money ball. And that was like 15 years ago or something. And it ended up like 5 or 6 years later, American Pharoah won the Triple Crown, first time in 37 years.
Tell us that story, because it's a good story, and I imagine most of the audience hasn't heard it, but it's
American Pharoah story?
Yeah.
Well, first of all, we bought the dam, and we were responsible for him keeping the sire. It was Pioneer of the Nile. And then the dam, Little Princess Emma, and she got hurt like in her second race, but she had talent. So the reason we bought her was she was fit all these new criteria: the heart, the gait, the this, the that, the diameter of her spleen, all these things. She was a very rare physical wonder, right? And so she became the mother of American Pharoah. And then the Egyptian pound, there was the Arab Spring, and the Egyptian pound went down like 50%, and the military guy was out, and the businesses, there was kind of like trouble getting money out. His business partners were military. So he was really affected by that. And he had this yearling that was beautiful. And our job was not only to buy horses, but to tell him what to keep and what to sell. So we go to Saratoga and we evaluate this horse. And he thought maybe he could sell it for $1 million because it's beautiful. And we said to him, no, don't. I don't know if you have a cash flow problem right now, but don't sell this horse. This is really something. And we got to the point where we said, sell your house, don't sell this horse. And that got heard. And it was the quote of the day in the New York Times, Friday in June. I think it was June 5th, the day before the horse won the Triple Crown. And they had an article, front page center, about this guy. He was a passionate guy. He was a big gambler. And so anyway, that's that story. Sell your house, don't sell this horse. So he didn't.
And the interesting part is you guys actually had to buy it back, right? I mean, it was
he had to buy it back. It was in the auction at that point, but he bought it back for $300,000. So he had to pay the commission, the 5% or something.
So the listeners who aren't familiar with horse racing, Triple Crown, and this is the first winner, and how long? It's been
37 years.
It's like there's a few, records in all of sports. It's like hitting 400 in baseball. It hasn't happened in forever. But it's like, winning the World Series, Super Bowl, and Stanley Cup all in 1 year and one horse. And it's such a rarity.
And he also went on to win a world championship against older horses and set track records later in that year. Excuse me. Go ahead.
Yeah. And so, you mentioned the horse went for $300,000 as a rebuy, which is great. How does the pricing of horses work? Because I know I've heard, what's the record? Probably in the millions, right? For how much?
16 million.
Okay.
That's private in an auction, but privately some go for a lot more than that. But for an unraced young horse, 16 million. I was there when that happened. And the day afterwards, I was interviewed. And I said, well, there's a problem. The gait that it looked so wonderful is because it was using, it's called a rotary gallop. It's what they use to come out of the starting gate. And when they've changed leaves, they do it once. And it's not the normal racing gait. The footfalls come in a different pattern. And you can't do that in a race, the whole race, because it uses too much energy and it's too dangerous for other reasons. And I said, so I think it may be a problem. The horse never won a race.
Wow.
And so the day after they bought it, I have that in the Thoroughbred Record magazine that they interviewed me. I said, well, I don't know. And of course that made me, that nobody wanted to hear that shit.
The well, it's interesting because you mentioned, I imagine in the early days, the betting, I mean, the auction markets were, quote, probably a little more inefficient. Has that changed over the years? I mean,
No,
you mentioned,
there's well,
oh,
actually, it is.
interesting.
They are more efficient, but there's more new money. This the Wall Street kind of guys are in there now,
Yeah.
and they'll pay anything. And the average prices are have gone way up and are kind of completely out of sync with the earnings ability of their horses. But no, it's I'm absolutely amazed. It is still the pedigree is the number one thing these guys are looking at. They're there are all these pedigree experts. The database that they base it on is missing key variables. And it's just they all make big livings, and it's enormous amounts of money are spent at these auctions. Everybody's an expert, and it's just most of it's ridiculous. They watch the horse running, and they don't use what I use, a high speed camera, so I can slow it down. And you can't use ordinary video, because if you do, when you try and stop it, all you get is fuzz because the hooves are moving too fast, and they don't think they need it. They don't know nobody else does it, right? And so I see these horses, and they do things when you look in slow motion that they're going to get hurt, and they go for 400,000, 500,000, or they have something, or they have a P heart. They have a tiny heart. Their chances of winning a graded stakes are like 20% of what they would be if it was normal. And they go for because they got a great pedigree and they look good, they go for a ton of money. Or they pay the most money for the fastest horses that go 9 4/5 seconds for an eighth of a mile. And as a fastest breeze at the show for the auction, and 10 flat. But in a race, they don't go that fast. They don't go nearly that fast. They go a second or 2 1/8 slower than that. So what is the point? So if they go 9 4, then if the horse can go 9 4, what does that prove? It may prove the opposite of what you want. Now you have a horse that can win the first half of the race, and then he's going to die, right? Or I watch it in slow motion. They say, yeah, it was fast, all right, and it was ugly. You should see what was going on with its ankles were twisted, and its knee is in the wrong direction, and it's not how fast they go, it's how they go fast. But to this day, the prices are related to how, unless the horse has something really wrong with it or a terrible pedigree, the fastest horses sell for the most money. And then it's everybody pretty much knows, and there's articles about it all the time, that the horses at the yearly and 2-year-old auctions, the unraced young horses that go for over $1 million, most of them never do squat. But they still are just, every one of those sales, there's multi-million-dollar horses sold.
Yeah,
with Zayat, we did what we did for Zayat, and our average acquisition price was $155,000. We didn't just, have an unlimited budget so we could buy all the best horses. That's what they think. Well, I don't get the best horses because I can't spend the big money, or bullshit. It's because they don't know what they're doing. But you can tell that really makes friends.
There's so many parallels to our world, in the investing space, not just on public stocks, but you see this with the private venture capitalists that will pay up in these massive sort of rounds that you question, is it more about the investment in the business? Or is it more about sort of the signaling? You see that with the tuna auctions in Japan, where people pay these just insane amounts of money for a single tuna.
That still goes on. There's still people, drinking beer and being silly. Yeah. But I was going to say something else about the heart and the quant thing. One of the reasons, the heart, whether or not heart size was related, for a long time was very controversial. And a lot of people have tried to do it, but they couldn't make it work. They couldn't make the statistics work. They didn't understand how we did it. And the way I did it was when I just really studied it, and I realized that I needed to only compare horses that were within like 30 days of the age of the horse, the same sex, the same chronological age, not just generally, but very precisely. And that were the same height and weight. Because, if a bigger horse would have a bigger heart. And so if a 900-pound filly that was born in May versus a 1,200-pound colt that was born in March, it was, you can't compare them. You can't say, well, this one had a big heart and that one had a small. So we don't do that. But in order to have every combination of height and weight and sex and all, I had to have 10, 20,000 horses, plus all the crap that goes into it, the drugging and the injuries and all the noise in the data. I now have like more than 50,000 horses in that database where we rigorously and we had a technician we proved we could be reproducible. The average person, the guy where they would read our paper and they would try out and do it. And they would think they were going to get reproducible results, but you don't train a technician for something that precise. They got to practice it. They got to do it hundreds of times, so they're not going to be reproducible. So I tell people, well, I remember some vet was telling our client, well, they could do everything. They'd read the paper. And I said, well, that's like giving an instruction book and a violin to somebody and telling them, thinking they can play a symphony. It's not going to happen. Not going to happen. So it's just you have to do the 10,000 horses and 50,000. You have to have a technician that's done 1,000. You have to, it's got to be rigorous, and it's a lot of time and money and to get it right. And there's no shortcuts.